In alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam Allah wa rasulullah. We're continuing with the hadiths from Sahih Muslim. We're in the Kitab el Salat. These are all hadiths covering a lot of information about the prayer and reciting during the prayer, how to pray, all of that. Today we're going to focus in on giving you a little bit of history. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the Quran, and we're going to also answer a question that many Muslims debate about, and that is whether or not it is lawful to pray 2 rakats after Asr. And we're going to also answer the questions about praying when you are in danger. Although we've already covered that, I'm going to cover it again. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to first start off with a little bit of history here. Let me share this with you. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the revelation that he was appointed by Allah to serve as a messenger to the people, to all mankind and jinn, the Prophet's teacher of the religion was the angel Gabriel. Allah appointed Gabriel to be his teacher. And Gabriel would meet with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to teach him the Quran and to teach him the deen. And when Gabriel met with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to teach him the Quran, he taught the Prophet the Quran in 7 different dialects. Why? Because the Arabs spoke 7 different dialects at that time. They spoke different dialects, just like there's different dialects of English. I speak the American dialect. Some people speak Australian dialect. Some people speak the British dialect. Some people speak the Canadian dialect. That's where hump day comes from. Somebody asked me at my job the other day, what is hump day, Layla? I said, we don't use that term in America, but hump day is Wednesday. And the Canadians refer to Wednesdays as hump day. Subhanallah, you know? So anyway, when the Quran was revealed, Gabriel would meet with the Prophet and he would teach him the words of Allah in the 7 different dialects which the Arabs spoke then. And afterwards, the Prophet would then go to the different tribes and he would teach them the Quran in the dialect they spoke. Okay? And this is just how it was. One day, many years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had died, Uthman was the caliph or the leader over the Muslims. Uthman decided to go and visit the different Muslim provinces because at this point in history, Islam had spread outside of Arabia and has spread through Persia, through the Roman Empire, this North Africa. In fact, under the Caliphate of Uthman is when Islam spread to North Africa. That's how you have Egypt, and we call it Maghreb, Egypt, Morocco, to Tunisia, Algeria. All those countries became Arabic countries, you know, under the Islam and all that as the Arabs spreaded Islam across the ocean. Okay? Well, Uthman decided to visit the Muslim provinces. So he went to Syria. At that point, Syria was also, before Islam, Syria was part of the Roman Empire. It was part of Mesopotamia. So he went there to visit and he noticed the people reciting the prayer in different dialects. They were pronouncing the Fatiha in a dialect that originated from out of one of the tribes, you know, in Mecca. And then when he went to another province, he went to Iraq, he noticed that they were reciting the Fatiha when they pray together. The Imam always recites the Fatiha out loud. This Imam was using a different dialect that's used by another tribe from out of Mecca. And then he went to another province. He said, Subhanallah, everybody is reciting the Fatiha in different dialects. So that's when Uthman said, I'm going to do something. He said, now Uthman spoke Arabic in the dialect of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Uthman, as everybody knows, is related to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the same tribe and all that. He said, what I'm going to do is this. He said, I'm going to have every Quran destroyed. And I'm going to have them rewritten in just one dialect. The dialect of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Uthman ordered all the governors of the different provinces to destroy every Quran they had. He said, because we're one nation. He said, we should all be reciting the Fatiha the same, reciting the Quran the same, in the same dialect. And before he did this, he met with the other companions who were the original companions, like Abu Huraira. He even met with Aisha, Ibn Masud, Ali, other companions who were still around to get their take on it. And they all agreed that this would be a good thing to do. Rather than having Muslims, as Islam is spreading around the world, people reciting the Quran in different dialects where they couldn't even understand each other. And the people of Syria were using a dialect because that's what they were taught from the person that brought the dawah there. The people in Iraq were using a different dialect because that's how they were taught. So he had every Quran gathered and destroyed. And then he had them all reissued in the dialect of the Prophet Muhammad, which is the dialect that we use today. He was also the one responsible for putting them in different orders of chapters and all that too, with the help of the other companions. Okay? So that's how we can thank Uthman for this. This is what makes Uthman such a great companion. He will be the third person to enter paradise after our prophet. He's the third best of this nation. The third best of this nation is Uthman. May Allah bless him. Okay? And we can thank him for preserving the Quran like that. He's the reason why now you can travel to North Africa, and you can travel to Oman, you can travel to Bahrain, you can travel to Australia, you can travel to America, and all Muslims are reciting Al-Fatiha the same way. We're all reciting the Quran the same way in the same dialect, which is the dialect that our Prophet Muhammad spoke. Thanks to Uthman. Okay? So that's a little bit of history, and let's look at this first hadith here. Umar tells us that he heard a man reciting Surat al-Furqan in a different style than what Umar recites. And Umar learned his recitation from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember, Umar was from the same tribe as the Prophet too. He spoke the same dialect as the Prophet too. So when Umar heard this man reciting this surah in a different mode, a different dialect, he grabbed this man. He was going to beat him up. But instead he grabbed him and dragged him to the Prophet. And he said, "Oh Prophet, this man is an innovator. This man is a deviator." Prophet said, "Calm down. Shway, calm down, Umar. What's wrong?" He said, "He's reciting the Quran in a different way." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the man to recite And he recited, then the prophet said, no, he's reciting in the dialect that I taught them. He said the Quran was sent down to me through the angel Gabriel in 7 different dialects. So as I went to the different tribes to teach them the Quran, I taught them in their dialect. So he's just using the dialect of his people. Subhanallah. So that's the hadith to prove, what I was telling you guys about how that's the history. That's why after the prophet died, people were using different dialects. But thanks to Uthman, he's responsible as always using the same one today. Also, the next hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the angel Gabriel taught me to recite in one way, and I asked him to give me the other ways so I can convey the message. He said, so it was 7 styles of recitation. So again, here's the hadith proving what I just taught you about the history. So again, that's just a little bit of history about our religion, about the Quran. When it was first revealed, it was revealed in 7 different dialects, because that's the different dialects that the Arabs spoke at that time. And the prophet wanted to convey the truth to them in their language so that they can understand. Just like me. A lot of people ask, Sister Layla, why do you teach in English? The people here don't speak Arabic, most of them. English is a universal language. So I'm going to teach Islam in the language that they speak so that they can understand Allah's word. Well, that's what the prophet did. He taught them in their dialect. Okay, so that's just a little bit of history. It's all about learning the meaning. It's not so much the language. Remember, guys, language comes from Allah. It's the meaning that's important. I can sit here and memorize and how to recite the Quran in Arabic, but if I don't know what I'm talking about, don't know what Allah is saying, it's not going to benefit me. So it's all about the meaning. That's what the prophet did. He recited the Quran to them in their language so they can understand the meaning. The same way I am teaching you this religion in your language so you can understand the meaning. Okay? So don't shoot people down because they don't speak your language. Okay? That's a lesson there. And so now, having had that little history lesson, let's move on to the next chapter or the next set of hadiths from Sahih Muslim. The next chapter addresses the times when it is forbidden for us to pray. For those of you who may not know, there are certain times of the night and day in which we as Muslims cannot pray. What you probably don't know, that we are also forbidden from burying our dead during those times too. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade us to pray after the Asr prayer until the sun has set. He's also forbidden us to pray after the Fajr prayer until the sun rises. Ibn Abbas tells us, I heard from so many companions, and one of them is Umar, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade praying after the Fajr prayer until the sun has risen, and praying after the Asr prayer until the sun has set. Also, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no prayer is valid after Asr until the sun has set, and no prayer is valid after Fajr until the sun has risen. Ibn Umar said, the Prophet said, do not intend to pray at the time of the rising of the sun, nor at its setting, because the sun rises and sets between the horns of Shaitan. What does that mean? That's why I got this wonderful picture here. The horns of Shaitan. For those of you who don't know, every time the sun rises and every time the sun sets, Shaitan himself, Iblis, he stands in front of the sun And Shaitan has horns. He has two horns. And he stands in front of the sun. Why? Because that's how arrogant he is. He knows that there are a lot of people out there who worship the sun. So he will take his arrogant self and stand in front of the sun so that when the people are praying to the sun, they're praying to him. So this is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has forbade us from praying during those times. We cannot pray when the sun is rising or setting because that's when the pagans pray. That's when the worshipers of Shaitan pray because Shaitan stands himself there because he wants to be like Allah, astaghfirullah, which is why he's cursed and damned. So that's why we don't pray. And also it's the same reason why we don't bury our dead at that time either. The reason why we don't bury our dead at that time too is for the same reason. We don't want people to be thinking we're worshiping the dead. Does everybody understand? Uqba tells us that there were times at which the Prophet forbade us to pray or bury our dead. He said when the sun begins to rise, when the sun is at its meridian, and when the sun is setting. Do not bury your dead or pray during those times because these are the times that Shaitan stands in front of the sun for people to worship him. So now that we've went over all those hadiths addressing the prohibition of praying after Asr and Fajr, what about this? There's a lot of Muslims out there who argue. They say, well, if it's haram to pray after Asr, why come the Prophet did 2 rakats every day after Asr? They also say, if there are no Sunnah prayers for Asr, why is it the Prophet did 2 rakats? I'm getting ready to answer that now. This shows how people have to be careful. You cannot teach this deen unless you understand it. You cannot go around calling yourself a hadith teacher when you yourself don't know the hadiths and understand what's going on. Let's look at this hadith here. Abu Salama says he asked Aisha about the 2 rakats that the Prophet used to make after Asr. She said, yes, the Prophet used to pray 2 rakats after Asr every day in my home. He never not prayed them. And Abu Salama said, well, Umar told us that we're forbidden to pray after Asr. She said, well, Umar doesn't know because the Prophet would come home and make 2 rakats after Asr every day. She said, the Prophet never abandoned the 2 rakats after Asr in my home. She said, Umar didn't know because he doesn't live in my home. So, does this contradict the previous hadiths? No, it's all about understanding, guys. In the other hadiths, what did the Prophet forbid us from doing? Did he say we can't pray after Asr? Did he mean we cannot? No, he was talking about when the sun is setting. We cannot perform any prayers when the sun is setting or when the sun is rising. The Prophet would go home and pray 2 rakats after Asr, but he did not make these rakats when the sun was setting. Everybody understand? You can pray voluntary prayers whenever you want to. And by the way, those 2 sunnahs are not sunnahs of Asr either. There are no sunnah rakats for Asr. I repeat, there are no sunnah rakats of Asr, and I repeat it again, there are no sunnah rakats of Asr. The Prophet did 2 voluntary prayers on his own every day when he went home after Asr. We can perform a voluntary prayer whenever we want to. Everybody understand that? I can make a voluntary prayer right now. That doesn't mean I'm praying a sunan of Maghrib or a sunan of Isha. Okay, so there is no contradiction. Islam forbids us to pray when the sun is setting. There are no sunnah rakats for Asr. But what the Prophet used to do was make 2 rakats for himself in his home every day after Asr. Does everybody understand? Just like he used to make the witter prayer. The witter prayer is not an obligation upon us either, but the Prophet used to perform the witter prayer every night. He loved the witter. He loved the 2 rakats of Fajr. And he would always go home after Asr to spend time with his family, and he would make 2 rakats when he got home. Nothing's wrong with that. This is no contradiction in none of these hadiths. It's just that the people that you see arguing about it, they're not scholars. And they don't understand the hadith. They don't know the history of Islam. They don't know the life of the Prophet. They don't know the lives of his companions. And they're misleading you. Okay? And not only can you perform a voluntary prayer anytime you want, except when the sun is rising or setting or in its meridian, but also, guess what? Not only did the Prophet make 2 rakats at home after when he went home after Asr, but also there's excellence in praying 2 rakats before any prayer. We have the hadith here where one of the companions said he asked Anas about the voluntary prayers after Asr. Okay? He said we used to pray 2 rakats after the sunset during the time of the Prophet. The Prophet would, and remember, Anas was one of the children that grew up in the home of the Prophet. So, like Aisha, he was telling the people here, yes, the Prophet would always come home after Asr and make 2 rakats. Okay? But those were not sunans of the Asr prayer. It's just something that he did. And also, guess what? Not only did he do that, but he would sometimes make 2 rakats after the Adhan for any prayer. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there is between the 2 calls of every prayer a time in which whatever you ask, Allah will give it to you. So if you want, you can pray 2 rakats between the Adhan and the Iqamat of every prayer. So there it is, guys. These are voluntary rakats. These are not sunans of a prayer. They're just voluntary things. If I want to, when the Adhan is called for Maghrib, before the Iqamat is called, I can make 2 rakats. Because that's a good time to ask for Allah to give you whatever it is you're in need of. Okay? So again, we have to understand the meaning of these hadiths. And finally for today, what about when you're traveling or in times of danger? We talked about this, guys. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam led the Muslims on an expedition. It's during the war. And he led them in 2 groups to pray. Whenever they were in an expedition, they would pray in 2 groups, 1 rakat. Remember, we talked about this. Whenever you are praying in times of war, the prayers are reduced to just 1 rakat. Everybody understand that? When you're traveling, the 4 rakat prayers are reduced to 2. But in times of war or danger, the prayers are reduced to just 1 rakat. Does everybody understand? And that's what these hadiths are talking about. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam led one group in a 1 rakat prayer, and then he led a second group in a 1 rakat. Okay, so when in times of danger, we can pray just 1 rakat. So, what have we learned from these amazing hadiths today? Well, first of all, we learned some history. We learned some history concerning the Quran. When the angel Gabriel taught the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the Quran, he taught it to him in the seven dialects spoken by the Arabs then. It was not until the Caliphate of Uthman that the Quran was placed in the one dialect and order that it is in now. We also learned today that not only are we forbidden to pray at the time the sun is rising or setting, but we are also forbidden to bury our dead during those times. Why? Because these are the times in which Shaitan stands in front of the sun so people can worship him. We also learn from these hadiths today that although we are forbidden to pray when the sun is setting, if you want to make a voluntary prayer after Asr, you can. Just don't do it when the sun is setting. And also we learn that there are many blessings in praying two rakats between the Adhan and the Iqamat of any prayer. And finally, if dealing in times of war or danger, the prayers are reduced down to one rakat. So these are the things that we've learned from these wonderful, amazing hadiths today. So we'll stop right here. If you guys have any questions or comments, if there's something that needs to be clarified, you can go ahead and type them on the screen. Please make sure you guys are here tomorrow so I can quiz you on these hadiths to see if you truly understand them. May Allah bless all the Muslims here, and I want to also thank Dr. Ibrahim Jamali for coming in and participating in our class today. I love you, dude. Okay, so we'll stop right here. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.